Your picture quality is good. I can
Thank
see that the
you.
cat is back.
Yeah, yeah. I think I sometimes I move him out of the way because he's like right there, right where some of the important information is for the details panel. And so sometimes I just gotta take him out. But yeah, cat's there when I can get him up there. Let's see. Let's
Okay.
go to green room games. Let's go here. There's the live, and yes, we are broadcasting.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
see. Let's go to green
Kind of
room
remind me of
games.
me
Okay.
when I wanted to start my Twitch stream. I just go like,
Uh-huh.
oh, what's
Okay,
up?
so let's do this. I'm gonna go to. Oh, let's let some more people in.
Also,
Okay.
Professor,
Uh huh.
I started my project, but I had a little hiccup with it.
That's probably going to happen as you learn how to use this software. You're going to run into issues.
Yeah.
When I was first every time I create a new project, when I was first starting off, I would have to like literally stop what I was doing because I had messed up to the point where I didn't understand how to fix it, and then I would just do it again. Today, what I'll show you how to do is create like you'll get to a certain point. Like let's say you finish lab one, right? What you
Hmm.
can do is you can create a new level, and then you can create that new level and call that new level lab 2. And then that way, if you mess up in lab 2, you can just make a copy of level 1 again and start over instead of having to start over from scratch.
Now I
Right?
know how those game developers feel like when they made a game and they have all the bugs there, like
Well,
Cyberpunk.
yeah. Well, hey, and I don't know what the exact issues were with Cyberpunk were. That's a multiplayer game with like all sorts of crazy stuff that was supposed to happen in like really high res for whatever reason, and I don't know exactly what the issues were because I don't really follow stuff like that. I know that they did have issues. I know that there was a lot of people that were complaining because you'll see it on your multimedia feeds, and I
They
do
didn't
follow.
finish the game, is what happened.
Really?
Yeah, they pretty
Yeah.
much just gave it out unfinished. Like simple things like pathfinding was completely, gone. Like cars would drive into walls repeatedly.
Hmm.
That was
Yeah.
their pathfinding, or they would just go randomly go flying in the air because bad collision detection, I guess.
That
Interesting.
could be it. Yep.
Okay, well then,
And
yeah.
I'm scared to play it on the 5. That's what I was afraid of. I just don't want my PS5 to have a virus. That's what I was scared of.
Oh, from okay, from the game that you might have
Yeah.
caught something from the game.
Yeah. Or my PS5 get hacked. That's why.
I
That's
mean,
still not very easy to do right now, so you shouldn't be too worried about that.
Okay.
all right. Let's go back to this. All right, so today's Wednesday. It looks like most of you guys made it. I got 16 people here present and accounted for. And let's see. So this is the things that have changed. Obviously, let's see here. So we've already explained how to turn in labs. So probably by the end of this weekend, you'll have, given lab 1, 2, and 3 a go, and you'll be able to maybe a couple of you guys will be able to start turning some things in. From there, we will finish. I should say finish talking about lab 3. So we'll finish lab 2 today, which we were right at the end with the pond, and then we'll go into lab 3. Lab 3 will be the landscaping, creating the ocean environment, creating a cave environment, and using the forest. So basically, what we're going to do is we're going to go through all the different modes. So the different modes that you can use to create environments inside of Unreal. From there, as far as what you should do prior to the next class, so I can imagine that most of us who have the software downloaded on our computers and are able to start would probably spend this weekend working through Lab 1, Lab 2, Lab 3, and creating
Oh
the
man.
house, the environment, the landscape, and then downloading enough packs to be able to properly uh, decorate the inside of your house, the outside of the house, and then create the forest elements that we need to create the environment. Because that's really what labs 1, 2, and 3, and 4 are about. That's why I grouped them together. They're all about the environment. After we finish lab 4, then we'll start talking about characters, enemy characters, and turning it more into a game. So right now, we're sort of spending the first 2 weeks ish. It'll probably be the maybe 3 weeks working on creating the environment that our game is going to take place in. Then we'll start making rules for it, putting our character in, putting enemy characters. That'll be 5, 6, 7. I think maybe 8 goes into it too. And then the last 2 labs, or the last couple of labs, will be grouped as creating the levels and being able to package the thing to be able to export as a game that exists outside of Unreal. So anyways, for you guys, that would mean spending the weekend trying to work on a level, try to dress it up. This sort of stuff is fun if you don't get overly frustrated. The videos are there, so remember that if you go back to home, and well, the record of the classes are there, so there's the 3 that we've had so far. The links are still the same, nothing new's been added. And then of course here are the labs. So 1, 2, and 3 are available. Obviously if you go to the links, you go to my homepage, you can go watch the other labs, but I haven't created the links for 4 yet because I don't want you to work into 4. I want you to really get good. This is a lot of skills. I mean, we're going to be talking about all the different modes today and how to use them. So, okay, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Okay, so let's see. So this is this is an additional level that I created. So what I mean by that, and let me get rid of this word right here, is that if I go back to my content browser down here at the bottom, and I go to first person BP and I go to maps, remember this was the map that we were started off with, right? This is the default map that set up that little grid that we started building everything around. This is a copy of that original map that I have now added more stuff to. And somebody had asked me the question, well, not the question, but I had made the comment that, you know, you can create a new level from an existing level, and then that way every time you work on a new project, if you mess up, you can always go back to the last working version of the thing that you had, and then from there you know, move forward, or at least have a second attempt and see if you don't mess it up, or everything works better, I should say. So the way to do this, and let me go ahead and save this level. So because you see how it's got that little asterisk down there, that little asterisk means that I've made a change, I've done something to the level that has not been saved. So let me go ahead and save current. So if I save it up here, that is saving the level, and you'll see that that has moved it here. Now if I say save all from here, that should have also have done the same, would have created the same effect. So let me go back to the level that we were on, or where we left off last class. I'm going to right click on that. I'm going to, it brings up a dialog box that then gives us the option to duplicate this. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that. And I'm going to say this is lab 2, right? And underscore map. So then that way I know that it's a map if I have to look at this as text. Notice I get the asterisks again. This time I'll do the save all from here. So same effect, right? Asterisk went away, letting me know that I don't have any materials or anything there that has been unsaved or needs to be saved. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on that level, and this is pretty much where we left off, right? So we were just creating the pond there. We were going to add some trees and some bushes on the outside, but I didn't really have any because I hadn't downloaded any packs that had any trees or bushes really in them. And this is what we left with, a very, very sad backyard. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to look to see if I actually have any rocks, because that's what I'm going to need, or that's what I like using. And let me go back to my content folder. Oh, hooray, I do have lots of rocks. All right, so when I type in the word rock down here, what ends up happening is that I'm filtering through everything that I have uploaded or downloaded into this project, right? So we saw that the other day where we went back to the Epic Games, either the website, or we went through Epic Games Launcher, and we went to the library and we started downloading packs. We made those packs available to our vault, and then once we went into the vault, we could say add this pack to our project, right? And then we could pick which project that it was going to go to. Most of us will only have the one right now, but you would have multiple projects if you were doing different things, or there might be reasons why. Anyways, so once those packs have been downloaded, right, they are actually residing on your computer and they're in your content folder, right? So if I go and I look inside my content folder, you can see that I have one called, sorry, I have to squint because the screen's far away, Detailed Greek Statues, Environment 2, which is I think a like an Asian village sort of thing with temples and things like that. And then there's the furniture pack, which we saw. That's where I got all the furniture for inside the house. The aquatic pack, the ocean pack, so that way I can do some decorating when we push into that. I thought there was more trees in this one, and I was very severely let down. This is what I had last time. And then I downloaded 2 science packs, some tropical fish, and then the water materials. So then that way I have the what are called particle systems to be able to create this. So again, I'm going to go to my content folder. I'm just going to type in rock. Now when I do that, it cycles through all those packs. It looks through everything that's in that pack, and it looks for anything that has the word rock in it. This is why naming your materials something that they are makes a lot of sense descriptively, because then the filter will help you. Now the other thing that I also see, in some of you may not have this right now, is these filters. So what I've done, you'll notice just to the left of the screen where I wrote the word rock, if you click on it, you actually have different things that you can filter through. So if you were looking specifically for foliage or for an effect, or for, in my case, since I'm decorating, I'm using materials, particle systems, and static meshes, because I want to bring in trees or bushes, which would be the static mesh. I might need to add a material to a geometry, so I want materials. And then I will specifically be looking for a particle system for the water to create the waterfall effect. So I have those checked, and because those are checked, they show up here, right? So now I can look through this entire list when I write rock, and I can go, I'm looking for a static mesh. Bingo. Now I don't have to look through 1,000 things and miss something. I can look at just the rocks that I have, the rock and a static mesh. Now if I was looking for a material, those are the materials that I have now for rock, and I don't know if there would be any rock particle systems. There might, but probably not. Maybe a sandstorm would be the closest thing that you would get to like a rock particle system, or like a rock slide might be a rock particle system. Anything where there's a lot of things that have to move around, which is why we're going to use that for water. But anyways, right now what I'm looking for is static mesh, rock, because I want to decorate the outside of my pool so I can have something that has the waterfall coming out of it. So I have a couple of things here called small rocks, river rocks. Let's go with this one. Let's put that out there. That's kind of cool. That's a kind of interesting looking rock. Let's go grab another one. Also kind of interesting looking. Also kind of interesting looking. And oh, that's a big rock. Okay, so this would be more if we were decorating a cave or a mountain. Now, maybe I like the shape of the rock. I just think it's way too big. Remember that you do have the transform for geometries, or I'm sorry, for static meshes, and as long as you keep this uniform, there shouldn't be any stretching, right? So I'm locking it, so whatever I stretch the first one to, all the other ones will stretch the same amount, and now I have a rock closer to the size of what I could use. Now, the other thing we'll notice is that this rock has it doesn't have a full three-dimensional thing, right? It's only on one side. So part of the reason for this is because what that would be doing for you is saving space, right? If the computer or the software doesn't have to generate graphics for the background, and those background graphics don't have to deal with light or anything else that's happening in the environment, that's less stress on your computer, right? So I would probably only use this rock if I could back it up against something that would then hide the fact that I can see through the rock when I'm on the other side, right? So I could maybe take this rock here, and let me go ahead and start arranging my rocks some way. So let's grab let's grab this crazy rock with no background, add it there, And maybe I might need to rotate that a little bit. And then we'll shove it in a little bit more. Let's see. And let me click off so I can see if there's any. And let me slow down too, because camera speed's too fast. Okay, so that worked out pretty well, right? This rock still has obviously its graphic on the inside, but this rock, which is less weighty, and I could take several of these rocks, right? So I could take another copy of this one by doing what is it, control, if we want to duplicate, control W. So that makes another rock. Same thing. I might come in, rotate it a little bit. Ooh, wrong one. And I did a control Z to back out of that. I mean, that's possible. There could be a hole in a rock. My character wouldn't be able to get, my character is too big, so I wouldn't be able to get into to be able to see that, but that's a little bit nicer. Now, we start getting this problem where they start looking too much the same, right? So this is where maybe taking that off, and that's the Z-axis there, so maybe with this one I might shrink it a little bit. Now it's a rock, so you're not going to see maybe tremendous amounts of stretch on the graphic, on the material that's actually placed on the outside of the mesh, but that's okay. And then maybe I can put another rock there to hide it if there's any other additional spaces that I see. But now I have sort of like an interesting looking rock that, you know, is different from everything else that I would have, you know, I've manipulated enough to where it just doesn't look like I grabbed the rock and threw it there. And then from there, let's go grab some of those. The other two that I brought on, let me make this a little bit. Let's grab this one and let's move it over there. Same thing here. Maybe I could make a, and I'm grabbing it from the middle. Oops, I thought I was grabbing all three sides. There we go. So now I have a big rock, and then maybe I'll make another copy of that. So I control W again, hit spacebar to change that, spacebar to get into my scale tool, and then I can have like a smaller one there. And if you want to do that weird thing where like that Japanese art form where they do the rock thing and they balance it, I mean, it's, you know, we don't have any gravity on these rocks. So
Feng Shui?
well, I don't know if it's feng shui. I think the actual rock thing has a name, like the layering of rocks on top of each other. Call me crazy, but I think it does have its own. Alright, so I'm going to use this one right here as sort of like the splash at the bottom of the waterfall. The splash rock, I guess. Let's move it into position here. Lower it down a little bit. And again, it's a rock, so the texture allows us to stretch just a little bit. And we can make some slightly different shapes there. So that'll be a splash rock. Move that back in. And I'm using my spacebar to go back and forth between my different tools. Okay. Fantastic. Alright, so now what I want to do is I want to look for those water materials, right? So I want to find the waterfall itself. So I'm going to remove the word rock. That then shows me every static mesh that I have available right now. So I'm going to unclick. So when you unclick, it defaults back to the folders, right? So if I'm in my content folder, then I would be seeing what's inside my content folder. In this case, I know that all the materials that I'm looking for are in the water materials folder, so I'm just going to double click there, and I'm going to see that I do have a particle system. So what a particle system is basically a bunch of small objects that are governed by some kind of like fluid dynamics. So dust could be a particle system. A sandstorm would be a particle system. Rain would be a particle system. Puddles landing on a surface could be a particle system. It's anything that needs a lot of small objects to create some type of a feeling of a fluid. That's why they're called particle systems. They're small objects, right? So here I'm seeing that I have waterfall or water splashes, and then I have water foam. So let me grab one of those. And wow, that's very big. But you can kind of see there what that's sort of doing, right? So we got this kind of, let me bring it up so we can actually see what it looks like there. And this is obviously larger than the area that I need. So let me see if I can go into my scale tool. I'm going to lock it again, grab one side, and sort of make it a little bit smaller, right? So now we can see the edge of the particle system. And let's drop that here. And let's add it closer to where the waterfall. Now I did not see the waterfall element that I was actually looking for. Oh, keep grabbing the green instead of grabbing the red one. The green one is letting you know which direction is the front side of this. So I should be looking at it this way. This is the way it was modeled. And that's why they put that green one there, so then that way you know what direction was supposed to be forward. Because on a particle system, well, on anything, our characters have these things too. So there we go. So it's still a little bit big. And here I'm scaling, but as I'm scaling in a degree, right? So I believe that's the scale tool right there. I'm going to unlock that. So then that way I can make it the proper size. Then I can lock that back in place. Now, it's not in the right place. It looks like it's hovering. So let's drop that back in. Put it there. And more or less it would be hitting on the rock, still kind of above where it needs to be. There we go. So now it doesn't look like it would be. So now we just need the waterfall. I wonder if that's in, nope, that's sunlight. I'm really surprised. Maybe it was in a different pack. You know what? Let me just type in waterfall. There it is. Okay. I think that's why I downloaded the Asian style pack, because that one, or the Asian village, because that one I think had the waterfall in it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab that waterfall, and that's the waterfall base. Let's wait for that. That is huge. You're going to have to zoom out. And there we go. So now we have the waterfall going over the edge, right? Very, very cool. Way too big. So let's go ahead and scale it down, but I'm going to use the scaler here in the transform tool. Make sure that it's locked. And then scale this down to the size that I need. More or less, and then zoom in. Okay, we're going to have to decorate our rocks a little bit. Maybe rotate that out a bit. That looks weird, so we need a couple of extra rocks. So, oh, no, I'm flying around too fast. So let's make a copy of this one. Control W. Go into my move tool. I'm going to grab the 2 dimensions so I can sort of shove it back this way. Maybe I'll rotate it a little bit so it doesn't look like exactly the same stone. And remember that we can rotate the other axis. So let me go 190 degrees. And then we'll bring that guy back up. Oh, that's weird. It's not in the right place. Kind of cool. I like the way it was hanging over though. But we need more rocks to make the gravity feel right. Nice. Okay. Fantastic. All we want to do maybe is go back to this and then sort of maybe push this back into the side a little bit so it doesn't look like it's flowing over the edge. And if you wanted to, you can make like a little pool right there. I mean, you can get as fancy as you want. Play around with it. The more you play with things like this and arranging them, the more it'll feel easier, and you'll get things like, oh, I can rotate it this way, or I can change its size, or I can change its scale and make it look slightly different, even though it's still kind of the same. So like with this one, I can see that the pattern is the same. So maybe what I'll do is I'll rotate it this way, and then whoever's looking at it this way will see the rock from that side and not from the same side. And then when you come this side, you don't have the pattern to look at, so your brain just goes, ah, the rock's different. Right? So, hooray, we now have our waterfall. So we have water splashing that we threw in there first, right? And then we did, then we got the waterfall that came down. Now that is in the environmental. Let me go back to the pack so you can see what it looks like. It should be one of the free packs. So when you go into Marketplace, you should be able to see it. But let me go here, and I'm going to filter for environments, right? So environments. And you'll see that we have like a advanced village pack, automotive beach scene. So all these are things to set up like an area, like the game area. And one of these is called, it's part of the Infinity series. So there's like Infinity Castle, Infinity Hangout, and this one which is called Infinity Blade Temple. And so if we click on it, is that the temple? That doesn't look right. Yeah, that's temple. There we go. So we have this, and so that waterfall was part of this collection. So all of these would have come, all these trees, all the cherry blossom stuff, these little platforms, and all this are already come pre-made, and you just throw them into your level. And that's where our waterfall came from, and maybe possibly some of our rocks. So, you know, download packs if your internet connection at your place, or if you're on a data plan that you don't want to like kill your data plan, go spend, you know, $3 at a Starbucks and sit there for a couple of hours and babysit that coffee and just use their internet to download hella packs, right?
That's awesome.
And then when you get home, you don't have to worry about it. But then you have everything on your computer, so you can just, you know, do that instead of spending your whole day, you know, trying to download or chew up your internet speed. But oh yeah, dude, you got to be smart. I'm on a unlimited deal right now for my data plan, but I know that they tier you. So basically, meaning like your first 20 gigs is super fast, and then after you pass 20 gigs, your next 20 gigs is a little slower, the next 20 is a little slower, the next 20 is a little slower, and yeah, you're unlimited. But by the time the end of the month comes, you can't download anything or watch anything on your you know, you can't stream anything because you're well. I use a lot of data. I like watching videos and stuff. So anyway, so now we have our waterfall, and that is pretty much the end of Lab 2. So just to recap what we did in Lab 2 before we move on to Lab 3 and start working with the landscaping is, Lab 1 was creating the walls and the environment for the brick. We set up these things and we moved some of our boxes out of the way, right? And we set up our character here. And that's where we were in Lab 1. Lab 2 was creating the 2-story structure. And so in Lab 2, what we did was we created the first floor, the second floor. I showed you how to do that neat trick where you can sort of still see inside the structure with the second box. Then the other thing we did was we learned how to use subtractive, so we turned a geometry into a subtractive to be able to cut out holes for doors, and then do the same thing for our windows. And then we turned a subtractive back into an additive and put a glass material on there so that we could make that. So we know that we can go back and forth between the additive and subtractive geometries. We then did the same thing to connect the first floor to the second floor. So we made a multiple room structure. We used another subtractive geometry to cut the holes for the staircase, and then used a staircase geometry to get the player from the first floor to the second floor. Now, I would have to look for it, but I did actually at one point create an elevator system that worked really well. So there are, you know, stairs aren't the only way to get people up to another level or to a different area of play. And you can also use platforms, which we'll use later. I'll show you guys how to do that when we go back into working with the worlds, how to move between levels and things like that. So that would be involving the cinematics, but we will be able to do that. For now, we can use stairs, and we can go from level 1 to level 2. From there, we learned that we can download packs. We decorated our house, downloading those packs with different materials and dressing this up. And you can go crazy. I mean, you can build walls, create environments, build a bathroom, a study, build an extra part to the house, build a garage. And then that was really other things, which was building the roof, getting used to the transform tools and the brush editing tools to create the angle that we needed, joining those two up. We used other geometries like the cylinder to create our columns there, so we had an interesting looking structure. And then from there, we started decorating the outside of our house, right? We learned that we could take a geometry, make it really, really flat, push it into the floor, put a grass on it, and or whatever we needed. Maybe you want to do one of those feng shui Asian gardens where they've got the rocks and the people go out there and do the thing with the rake, right? If you could find a nice material like that, you can make it whatever you want. I know if you go to Arizona, people don't have grass. People have rocks in their front yard. They do, instead of having a grass rock garden. And it's just like stone or fine ground up, it's just not dirt. I mean, it's pretty much sand. I thought it was weird when I went to Vegas. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Makes sense, though. So you can put whatever material you want. And then from there, we went and we downloaded, through the materials or the packs, we found different foliage that we could grab and maybe start decorating. If I wanted to feng shui that a little bit more, put some vegetation. And then we also saw that we could alter the vegetation and the size and the rotation of it, so then that way they don't all look like copies of themselves. And throw that there. So then that way we can create some variants and use, not have to use too many things or too many, new meshes, which would then, of course, slow down your computer because it's got to take that into consideration. And then we used our first particle systems, and we made a depression into the floor again using the subtractive to create our pond area. And then we sort of dressed that up with foliage and used our particle system to create our first waterfall. So out at the end of lab 2, this is what we should have. We should have a 2-story structure decorated on the inside, decorated on the outside with, defined areas and walls, and then our little thing there. All right, so that's the end of lab 2. In lab 3, we're going to go ahead and push on into it. We'll go into lab 3 immediately. And in lab 3, what lab 3 really is about your modes, right? So the mode that we've been using right now has been the select mode, which means that I go to something and I click on it and I select it, right? And then whatever happens in my details panel happens, and then I can make changes to that thing that was selected, right? But we also have one called landscape. We have another one called foliage. We have another one called brush editing, and then the last one called mesh paint. Now, for the mesh paint, we're really not going to use that one too much. And the reason for that is because in the landscape, let's go ahead and open up the landscape, right? So, ooh, that's kind of cool, right? Kind of looks like we're now in that, well, if you guys are old enough, you remember that Homer Simpson episode where he goes behind the bookshelf or something because he's hiding from his sisters-in-laws, and he goes into that 3D whatever. So we feel very 80s. And what this does is basically this is a landscape mesh, which is going to allow us to be able to deform this mesh, so then that way we can create an environment, right? And so this grid that we're looking at is what we'll be able to deform. So then that way we can create those mountains that you saw for those that came in early and saw what I was working on. Now, again, this can be taxing for your computer. So if you have a very, if you're limited on RAM or processing power, what you may want to end up doing is not making this grid too big. The other thing I'm also going to do is make sure that my grid is actually underneath the brick, so then that way when it comes up, and what I mean by that is if I do it now, then we would have, the landscape would actually be coming into the doorway. So what I want to do is push that down far enough to where I know I'm below the area of my floor in here, right? So I'm not cutting into that. So Let's take a look at this. So we do have a couple of tabs that popped up. We have one called Manage, we have another one called Sculpt, and we have another one called Paint. Now, we can't go into Sculpt or Paint because we haven't actually created the landscape yet. This is sort of just a representation of it until we actually go through its parameters over here. So let's look at those. Right, if we wanted to right now, we could add a material to this. So instead of it being this green weirdness, I could make it look like sand, or I could make it look like whatever material I have available in my materials down here in my content folder. All I would do is grab it and drag it into that folder. For right now, I would avoid that. We're going to actually end up making our own material, which we're going to be able to paint on. For those, again, who came in early, you saw that. From there, it should bring you to 0, 0, 0. I've pushed this down, that's why you're seeing this at 48. From there, I can also rotate this, which really doesn't make any sense at the moment. Maybe if you were bringing, and you can bring in a second landscape material, another one of these, and have it separate from the first one in the same level. So this is not a single object that we can bring in. We can create another one in the same level. Now from there we see scale. I would leave the scale the same, so then that way because what that's going to do is it's going to stretch the area between these bricks instead of adding more of the grid, right? So if you stretch it, not good. And you can also stretch it out of shape, so then that way later when we put in our material, it'll look weird, right? It'll look like one side is pulling. So we're going to leave those all the same. From there, section size, and let me move my camera so we can see this. So what we have here is section size, and we have 7 by 7. So that made a very small grid, almost the size of what we were working on. Wow, it's moving around very fast. Let's move it to a 15 by 15. Let's move it. And some people might do this. Maybe all you need is your character to start outside the complex, find a way to get into the complex, and then you make sure that they can't get off of this. And then a lot of what some people will do is they will actually bring in GIFs, like JPEGs, and they'll put them on a surface and make it look like there's mountains in the background, because from the perspective of the character who's going to be down here, they're looking up. They're not seeing that it's another plane with a picture on it, and that can save you a lot of processing power. So maybe you don't need a very extensive thing, you just need it big enough to give the feeling that the character is outside the complex and needs to find a way to get in. Maybe that's part of whatever the level is that you're working on, the mechanics for how the level works. And all you need to do is get it to where they can't fall off, and then make it look like in the background you have the appropriate scenery. But it doesn't have to be actual geometries, it could just be pictures. And I've seen that a lot. Okay, and it's all about space saving. So for right now, let's just go and see what the biggest one looks like. So let's zoom all the way out. And I probably wouldn't do this either, because this you have to decorate all this. You have to put a bunch of static meshes. You have to put all your trees, your foliage, whatever this is all going to be. And it's quite extensive. I mean, if I pushed my character, let's move him outside the wall and put him on one of the, let me zoom back to a slow speed. Let's go, that's too slow. Where are you? There we go. Select you. Oh, I can't do it right now because I'm in that. Well, anyways, I was going to put them on the edge and then just walk over, and you would see that it would take literally days for me to walk from one end of this thing to the other end. It's quite big. It doesn't seem that way to us because we're quite a bit up, but that's a huge chunk of land. So I'm going to go back to the 63 by 63. So that's how, if I was to count the number of squares, and when we say 63 by 63, it's the number of squares here. So it's 63 squares going this way, 63 squares going that way. So if each one of our quads only has 7 by 7, the same number of quads are there, but they only have 7, and I wish I could just kick. And you can see that the grid got a little bit bigger. And let me slow down my camera. And we could now probably count that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 before the next quadrant. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 before the next quadrant. And you can see that it's a slightly different color. It's like a slightly brighter color. So that's what we're actually changing when we change that. So 63 by 63. Now the other thing that also happens there is as you start to deform this, the more quadrants you have, the smoother the deformation is. There's not as much stretching between each one of these, and we'll see that in a minute. But so I usually leave it 63 by 63, which is the default. That's what it comes in with. From there we have 2 sections of 63 by 63, so if you even wanted to push that out a little bit further, you could do that. And now we can see that this is about twice as big. And then number of copies we could start adding, and we can see that we could now get a really big grid. And if I want to push the limits, I can say there's a button down there that says fill world, and now we can see that I have created a crazy, I don't even see my house anymore, right? We're in space right now. We're on a 747, 30,000 miles up. And there's our little house, right? All right, so let me not make this the craziest, biggest size that it could be, so that way I don't kill my computer. And what I'm actually going to do is jump out of this mode and then jump back in so I get all the defaults again. I think. Nope. So 63 by 63, all those are the same. 100 by 100. I don't need the 2 by 2 section, so I'm going to go 1 by 1. And let's just make this 10 by...
Default copies is 8 by 8.
Oh, you know the other thing in talking about defaults, you see these little yellow staples that are right there? So what those little yellow staples do is they actually reset this to whatever the default is. So I'm glad I went through this, but thank you for the info. But we could just click that right there, and then all of a sudden this goes back to where our default area was before we started making any changes. But yeah, 8 by 8. So now that we have just a standard area, which is fine, because we're going to modify this in a minute, this is going to be fine, and I'm going to go ahead and click create. So we're going to see this very boring checkerboard, sort of like the same geometry that we would have if it was the same material that we'd have on the outside of a geometry, right? That checkerboardness. So now that we have this, we've actually gone from the